Hello, Zach.
Hello, Jeff.
How are things in Kansas City, or at least
Uh,
nearby Kansas City?
well, you should know. You were just here.
You know what? You have an abundance of ticks and poison ivy and itchweed. That's all I can say.
Well, I don't disagree with you. We just went camping a few weeks ago, and I think my my kids got the ticks, my wife got the mosquitoes, and I got the like craziest, huge, like all of a sudden blister of I'm assuming poison ivy on my knuckle. So I agree fully. Yeah,
Yeah, we brought some back to Illinois to my wife's dismay, and gets kind of creeped out, waking up in the middle of the night and finding some ticks,
yeah,
and worried about all night long.
yeah.
Everything you feel is that a tick crawling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. No, it's stupid hot. It was 103 or 105 the last 2 days. So yeah, stay inside. Don't leave the house for any reason, and monitor the levels on the AC to make sure nothing's overheating. It's
I was afraid with all the disc golf courses and all the things going on there that I would fall in love with Kansas City and would want to move there and never leave. But then it is a pretty city, but my goodness, the number of ramps and off ramps and merges, and then once you get off, the number of the roundabouts, and I'm like, who roads don't even connect straight? Like, who thought of the planning of this city?
and that's I'll say I slightly agree with you, but I also maintain that like Kansas City is not impossibly laid out, and I think there's some record about like it has the smallest number of residents per square mile of any city of its size. So like it's super open.
Yeah, it's
Um,
sprawling.
it's sprawling, but yeah, I mean, like I go to I go back east, and it's like these are the cities where nightmares are made, right? Like, um,
Well,
yeah,
I'm not worried about, like, right. If you take the wrong turn in St. Louis, you can find yourself in a very bad part of town.
right.
You don't worry about that in Kansas, but I think your opportunities of like messing up and winding up where you don't need to be, it's
Oh,
it's
okay.
it's very, you got to really pay attention. And pre-GPS days, I don't know how people made it. Maybe it wasn't that complicated back then.
I'm sure it wasn't as complicated, but also, yeah, the navigator's role was much more important. Yeah, yeah.
Because most, like, we'll have like a circle around the city, maybe two circles, and then there'll be
No.
spokes of
We
hub
have
right
like
here.
bisecting, yeah, lines. We
Yeah.
have like an X. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, and then you have these weird roundabouts right before you get onto an exit ramp or coming off an exit ramp. It's just like, wow, you don't want to be, you definitely want to be paying attention the whole time that you're driving.
That's right. Right. That's
So
right. Yeah.
so anyway, yeah, Kansas City. So there's because you mentioned there's a convention that you also
Yep.
attend there.
There's like four.
Wow.
There's one next week actually. I think that's part of the problem. Like I love most of them. Um, but they're all like around 1,000 to 2,000 people. I'm
Yeah.
like, if you guys would just like, you know, join arms, and do one big one, we could actually have a really crazy cool event. But instead we have like little nice cozy ones that are fun to attend, but probably will never, be a destination event.
No, but maybe that's, maybe, like you say, it's cozy. So now instead of one big one, you get four small ones.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. The only downside of that is that I've seen is that it's really hard to um convince publishers or
Oh, you're
bigger
right. Yeah.
companies to come out. They're like, no, like that's not going to happen for 1,000, 2,000 people. Where if you had like an 8 or 10,000 person show, I think you would get plenty. So
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think the only reason anybody outside the United States knows where Indianapolis is only because of Gen Con.
yeah, right, yeah. Got the
Otherwise,
biggest. He's got the biggest convention center with the most connected hotels. Maybe that's more that one. I think it's the most connected hotels to the convention center in the country. Um,
yeah, and they're adding in what, some more too.
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So cool. So you have a new job.
I do, yeah, yeah. Work for Limithron, which is probably better known in some circles as the company who makes Pirate Borg.
So what does that, do you know what the name even means? I mean, it came from
Yes,
something.
I do actually, because it's near and dear to my heart. So Limithron is a Sindarin Elvish word that means light bringer.
Ah, so I was thinking it's going to be like it would be the opposite.
Oh yeah, darkness
Yeah.
dweller. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, nah, it's I think I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question for Luke to say, like, why was that? Like, I know why, I know of the name, I know what it means and all that, but why? And Limithron is also the name of his, like, we'll call it alter ego
Oh,
persona, which is Limithron, the pirate wizard. Um,
well, but also he's a lighting man.
that's true. So it's probably like Lightbringer is probably about that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that, you know what? Right on you. We've solved the puzzle. It only took you like, I would have sat here all night being like, yeah, Jeff's right. What? Why? Yeah,
You're doing all this dark, just dark material, this pirate Borg, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, Lightbringer. It's like, okay, now we understand.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's it for sure. Yeah, I love it. Good job. Yeah, so I'm there, and I am their director of marketing, which is kind of a fun new role for me.
So, director of marketing. So with Wagdi, were you doing marketing there anytime?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, and this probably goes back to our overarching topic that we kind of discussed for this episode, right? Which is like, you know, working with the ins and outs of a small publisher or whatever, right? Um, and I think their answer is, yeah, I mean, like, it's hard to be a full-time person in a small publisher and not be marketing in some capacity. I think a big thing that I did over, of course, at Wagdi was anything related to Kickstarter or BackerKit or email promotions or I manage the Facebook scheduling of posts and things like that, things of that nature. A little bit of Facebook ads. So yeah, absolutely. Like definitely in Wogby. But certainly there were other people that did it too. I was by far not alone, of course. Jared and Kirsten and Travis and people like that also carried the load.
Okay. So, but here you are the person.
Well, let's go going back to this is a small company.
Yeah.
Everybody's pretty much gonna be a marketer. But I think, yeah, I think like the stated intent is that Luke is the creative, awesome owner that does all the writing and illustrations and things. So he's got his arms full there. He's going to do some marketing stuff, of course,
Right.
just because he's the owner and has his hands in it. And Tyler is the same way, where he's got his own things. He's our community manager, quartermaster, as we call him. And he does a ton of stuff in preparation for conventions and product and swag and all sorts of crazy stuff. So all of that has an element of marketing to it. But yeah, I'll be doing more of the ad management and again, like big Facebook pushes and promotions and yada yada yada.
Some of the not so fun sides of marketing. The day to day, run the numbers, setting up the machinery to make sure it works like it's supposed
Machinery,
to.
yeah, 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 I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Because Facebook ads they're not hard, but they do take a bit, and you got to think about it. And
Yeah, and I think the thing that I could commend them for a few things, but I think one of the things that'll commend Limithron for is basically giving me the time up front here to kind of like put everything into place, like get all of the like things cranked up and ready to go. Because the hardest part of marketing is doing it fly by the seat of your pants in the moment.
yes,
And if you can have a few weeks to kind of like settle in, start building out a calendar, you know, maybe get some refresher, like all these little things that are hard to do if you're just like, oh, I gotta make ads today. I gotta make ads tomorrow. Like just not focused on anything but what's right in front of you. So it's been really great. Working on that. I don't know, like little things. Like I'm working on a 60-day advanced social calendar for ads and different types of posts and whatever. Which isn't to say that we don't post things in the moment. We absolutely do, but we want to make sure that like we got a ton of content to talk about and a ton of things to show. So let's get them like planned out, scheduled. Let's make sure everything looks great. All the text has been read by multiple people. Like super nice. That's super great stuff. So,
Yeah, and I know for me, I think this last Kickstarter was probably the most prepped that I've been for Gary's Appendix 6,
mhm.
and even had the Facebook ads done weeks ahead of time. It was just because I'm about ready to go on vacation. It's just nice just
Yeah,
to go in, click a button, and it's like, okay, it's ready to go.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, super handy. I built out a I'll show it to you after this call, after our chat, but I had a spreadsheet before, but I decided to scrap it and do it completely different. And I built out like this huge, like it was like 12 tab spreadsheet for a Kickstarter that like is gets super into the weeds, but if you plug all the information in, plug all your numbers in, plug all your reward, like all your items and all of your stretch goals or whatever. It's all interconnected, so it'll like spit out like, hey, this reward tier, oh, you're charging $60 for it. You have a 600% margin. Oh, you bumped it up to $65. Now you have a
Oh yeah.
7% margin, and that equals this amount. And also, it's calculating behind the scenes and saying, okay, based off of your changes you've made, it anticipates like you should if you have this many followers, you'll probably make around this much. So kind of like all weaves together with hopefully the plan to be like, I think what it'll end up spitting out is you'll always know what your margins are. You should never be in the red on a project. You should know exactly like what it's going to look like. And also, you should know roughly what you're going to make before you hit the big red or big green button. And then finally, it's all there kind of like in cells ready to go. So we can grab that, and the next Kickstarter, it's all you just, tweak a couple of knobs and you can port a lot of that information right over again. So,
Well, I think margins are even more important as you get into larger Kickstarters
yep.
because, if I'm off a little bit on mine and I've got, 200 backers, that's one thing, but margin spread over like 2,000 backers, that's a different problem
It's
of
something I learned.
magnitude.
Yeah, it's something I learned from Modifius working with them. Like a lot of their conversations, when you talking with one of their project managers, is like, hey, here's the margin that we are allowing ourselves to have for a Kickstarter. So if you're talking about stretch goals and you're talking about, oh, let's add more cards, or let's add lamination or spot UV coating, or let's add 6 more pages, right? Then that all gets plugged back in and it spits it out and it says, hey, your margin is still within the line, within the window, or you kind of went over budget. And then you have to have a meeting to say, are we fine to only have a X percentage margin on this? Is that worth it? Is the incentive worth it? Or do we need to rethink some of this? So
And the longer the time between when you end a Kickstarter and you're going to do fulfillment, the greater chance there is for that you increase risk that something can go up in price.
100%. It could go down in price too, right? Like, and it could do anything. And one of the big things that I always encourage is like, don't factor shipping in to
Yes.
your calculations initially. Don't put it on your Kickstarter. Also, don't work it into your budget because that's the backer kit budget. And calculating shipping can be its whole other animal. You don't have to. You need to have rough shipping estimates. But if especially if you're looking 6 months out, the best you can hope for is a rough shipping estimate. You're definitely not going to be accurate, months and months out. I just saw Pirate Ship sent out, no connection to the company, but Pirate Ship, the website where you can, get really great shipping rates, just sent out an email today saying that I can't remember what company, but either UPS or USPS is raising their rates very soon. So, you never know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, I was just listening to was it Design Panel? No, there's a Metatopia. Um, they do recordings at Metatopia of seminars, and there's a podcast that's of those recordings.
Oh, cool.
And they were one of the things they were saying is that a lot of things you can't count on. They said, but shipping does seem to be predictable of going up incrementally. Both USPS and UPS. It's something you can pretty much count on.
You can count on it, and if it doesn't go up, probably packaging is going to go up. So,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think the thing is like you're saying, those margins, if your margins are slim, but your fulfillment's going to be year out, there's a lot of risk.
Yep.
If your margins are small, but your fulfillment time is going to be short, there's a lot less risk.
Yep. Yeah.
And so
I think like one thing that I always feel like is worth weighing is like ideally I think whatever your product is costing, hopefully you're making 4 times that, charging 4 times that for it. Let's say it that way. At least. Um, so if you got a $6 zine and you're not charging $24 for it, it's going to be a rough go. Not to say you won't make money on the Kickstarter, because you will. But that excess inventory is costing you so much of your profit. And then if you're trying to sell into retail or anything like that, just the margins just get so small so fast. So I like obviously the higher margin you can get, the better. But at least for ideally like 6 or 8 times would be fantastic for just about anything.
if you're going
You
to
can't
sell
do
it to distributor, a lot of times you're talking about 30 or 40% suggested retail
yeah.
is what you're going to get. So if you ever want to go that route, you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the likelihood is that at some point you're gonna run the product's gonna run its life course, right? And you're gonna need to liquidate or sell it off in some way, right? And it's nice to be able to do a big discount at the end if you want to without losing money on each one that you're shipping out. So if you pay $6 for zine, you're charging 24. You can, that product is out for 4 years, and then you're like, I think this is done. We're gonna clear it out. You could still charge, $8, get to a 70% off sale, and still be making a couple bucks off of each one of your remaining. So it's hard though, because I know the market's weird. Like it's not all up to us and what we feel like we should be making. There's a consumer on the other side that has thoughts about that as well. So
That there is. And I think, there's some people out there who are definitely are selling their products much too low.
mhm.
Some people, I'll get upset thinking it's, bringing down the value for everybody else. But for some people, it's like, the amount of work and energy they're putting into, they deserve, especially when you're putting all that your own money into it and risking all that money. There should be some sort of, payoff for that. And so some people, charging $12 for a zine, it's just like, it's like you can do what you want. I'm not, knocking anybody does it, but it's especially if you're trying to earn something to make it, to pay off at least for some of your time.
I think my personal opinion is, and not everybody agrees with this, and that's great, because we should have conflicting opinions. I think $20, if your zine is over 24 pages, I don't care what it is. I think it should be $20 at least. Just because it's an effort, and you can only make so many products in a year, and it's really hard to make plenty of money on Kickstarter. Like by plenty of money, I mean it's hard to get noticed on Kickstarter unless you're making quite a bit of money, and it's hard to make quite a bit of money if you're selling a book for $5 or whatever. So I really like $20 is kind of the gold standard. But there's variance, and that's cool. Like I don't get mad when somebody sells theirs for 16 or 25.
Right. And it's hard. It's hard to know again, like anything, like what the market will bear, so to speak. And, in some ways, if I make the same amount of money, but I could sell to more people,
Exactly.
I would be more happy than selling at a high price to fewer people.
Yeah. Yeah. If you sold your zine for, I think you sell yours for like 16 or $17 on Kickstarter, somewhere around in there, I think.
Yeah.
If you and let's just say you got 500 backers, if you charge 20, would you have 400 backers? You might make exactly the same amount of money or close to it, but you have 100 people less that got your product. Well, that doesn't seem great. on the other side, if you sold your zine for $10 on Kickstarter, would you have 800 backers? Would you make about the same amount of money, right? Like then but that's a tricky question to answer, and I think sometimes my answer has been different depending on the product and where I'm at in life and in the year. So
Well, the problem too is with having a lot of backers is more things can go wrong,
mhm.
and then it's more of a headache to deal with.
And your margins are smaller because you
Yeah,
you knocked it down, right? So
yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, it's hard. I don't know what the answer is.
I was telling somebody yesterday, a client yesterday, like one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is like I think the if you want just eyes on and you want to just build out your mailing list, build your community, build the number of people that are aware of you, I almost feel like the better avenue for that than doing a Kickstarter is just making a free PDF and getting email addresses for it and promoting that, putting it on drive-through, do whatever putting it everywhere. Just, hey, I made a free 20-page OSE adventure, or I made a small bestiary for Borg or whatever. And I mean, it shows time and time again with those that you can build quite a nice mailing list off of that right away, pretty quick. So
Yeah, and I think also if you're a person that like loves a particular the particular property, or I mean a property, what's what I'm looking for, system, that works out even better because you can get with a Facebook group, you can interact, and
yep,
especially if you're dealing with larger systems with larger, well, maybe not even, it's not even true because there are some of these games that maybe are underserved,
yeah,
and I don't know, maybe they'd be hungry for content.
yeah. Who knows? Like it's a yeah. It's tricky, but I do think that like like free stuff promoted outside of Kickstarter to build following, as opposed to saying, I want to do the Kickstarter for this 20-page thing that I put together over 2 weeks. Um, and I'm gonna get 400 backers off that at $2 each. Like all that's doing is driving down value of products on Kickstarter as a whole. And yeah, you got a bunch of people off of it, but you could have probably gotten that type of person just by posting elsewhere a free product.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think the other thing is if you are going to Kickstarter, I think what you're putting out had better be of good quality all the way
yeah,
around. And
yeah,
so I think sometimes it's like you say, you're kind of are saying it's like, work out your kinks, put your stuff out there, build your following. And then when you're really ready, you got a number of people, then you've also got your act together, then go to Kickstarter.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think so. And you could go to Kickstarter while you're at it. Like, I mean, like there's folks like you that have like a million irons in the fire, and you're like pushing up against like I got so much to get out, and Kickstarter can only move so quickly. Um, and I think some like what I said yesterday to the client was like, I think you need to decide maybe earlier on in your process, but I think you need to decide if this is a product, what the goal of this product is,
Yeah.
and put it on the track, because we only have so many tracks as a small publisher.
Yes.
And once there's a train on a track, once you've done a Kickstarter, you can't put another
Yeah.
train on that
Yeah.
track. You
Yeah.
can go maybe do a backer kit crowdfunding track, or a game found track, or an Indiegogo track, or a whatever track, but you can't put anything else on that specific Kickstarter track for a while. And the busier you are, the more prolific you are, the more team members you have that are putting out stuff, like very, very quickly, you're going to find that one track is not enough. I mean, Free League doesn't even take everything to Kickstarter anymore, right? Like they do most books don't go to Kickstarter on Free League side. However, they have two Kickstarter profiles, right? Um, Modifius has a Kickstarter profile and a Game Found profile. Like the answer is, and they've had those for a long time. The answer was pretty much immediately like, one product at a time in the pipeline isn't going to cut it.
No. And those companies really have to be cranking things out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a bad example when we're talking about small publishers, probably.
Well, but the same is true. Well, let's say, for instance, it is and it isn't. So it's still the same situation, right? It's like if they could do one $10 million Kickstarter every 2 years,
Right.
that might be what they'd be doing all the time. They'd be like,
Yeah.
forget this other stuff. But $1 million Kickstarter for somebody their size isn't that much money.
Yeah.
When you start talking about all the freelancers and all the things they have to do, a number of
Yeah.
employees and so forth. So they have to. They're on that. They're on the tiger.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. 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 Tricky. Who knows? There's an answer here somewhere. And
but you are right. I mean, the thing is even if you don't have the limits of Kickstarter, you still have your own personal limits, right?
yep.
And so you're right. What do you want out of your business and what do you want out of the product? What are your goals?
Yeah.
And even if they're not, and for me, they can, I've got a number limit. So I start out the year thinking like this year, I want seven Kickstarters,
Mm-hmm.
but the order and what those Kickstarters are keep rearranging.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Flexibility. I mean, that's the benefit of the small publisher, right? Is that we can be flexible. That the zines and pamphlets and small books in general, like you never know which one's going to rise to the top and gonna come to the point of being um uh out of the stage of raw and into cooked territory. And you it's nice to be able to pivot and say, oh well, I had already started building out a Kickstarter for Gary's Appendix, but Scoundrels of Brixton is ready. Gary's Appendix isn't quite ready. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that one in, right? Like that's great, and it doesn't really affect you in the long term. Again, assuming that everything else is in place. So
yeah. And I think for next year, I don't know what's going to happen because, you know, like you said, so many tracks,
yeah.
there are limits.
But
So
the cool thing is, I mean, I guess it's cool. It's more like it's just a relief for me. Like working with companies like Modifius, I noticed right away, like as they aren't any, the rules don't change for them either. Like, definitely I've talked with them at one point in a year, and this is the timeline of products that we're releasing this year, right? Or we're gonna do. And then you talk to them 3 months later, and that's all been shuffled. And then you talk to them 3 months later, and that's all been shuffled again. Like it doesn't get better. And I
no,
think that it's not a bad thing. I think like that's a sign. I mean, Modifius is doing great. We talked about Free League. Like these are companies that are doing great, and I bet you part of the reason they're doing great is that they've managed to hold on to some of that adaptability. So
well, and I imagine too, though I may be wrong for me making some assumptions, but if you're doing licensed property, approvals and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure things can get held up in ways that you have no control over.
yeah, yeah. I I this is a secondhand statement. This does not come, but what I was told was that the first core rulebook for Fallout 2D20 um, took 2 years to get through approval with Bethesda. So you think about that, like I'm sure nobody had in mind that it was going to take 2 years. I'm sure they were like reshuffling timelines and budgets and strategies and personnel that whole time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, there's a ticking clock in that you only have a license for so long, but there's also this like it's out of your hands half that time. So
Yeah, that would be a nightmare. That would be an absolute nightmare.
yeah,
What's funny is I got the book, and I looked through it. It's great, and I've never played the Fallout RPG, but after having read it, it's like I don't think I want to. I think it looks like it plays like the video game, and down to the add-ons and mods that you can do to weapons,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm like, well, that's genius. But and I'm glad they're able to make their system do that. But wow, they really took the 2D20 and looks like they made it into something that very much models the video game.
yeah. It's really cool. I like that game a lot. Like all the loot tables and salvaging and scrapping and yeah, like that's my jam. So it's fun to um go like dig into a scrap heap and see what you find.
Well, and yeah, and that's just it. I think, especially if there was a means of computerizing some of that would also make it even easier. But there's a lot of fun. It's those mini games, right? So,
Yeah.
for me back in the day, it was when I was young, it was the Dungeon Master's Guide and the castles and so many gold
Hmm.
pieces per 10 foot of this and so much for this. And, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. That's what I want. I think I played a game of Pirate Borg with a group of people the other day, just kind of a one-off. And we spent like the last hour of it. Like we had gotten a big treasure and we had conquered another ship. We were taking command of another ship. And so like the last hour, we just spent like doing math and accounting and like budgeting and like, okay, how much of this treasure are we gonna put here? What are we gonna do? Like open up the book. What, we need to sell this ship that we got because it's not ideal for us. How much do
you're
you think we
playing
could get out
Traveler.
of
I don't
it?
know if you realize that.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's all I want. I said like that's my ideal pirate board, pirate RPG is just all right. You have conquered something that happened off scene. You fought something that happens off scene.
They got so many
Now, what are
bolts
you?
of silk. Do you
Yes,
want to take them
exactly.
to this city or that city?
Yeah, don't. Yeah, be careful there. That's my love language. Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, I like that a lot, and Fallout does that great. And there's you can find cavities of that in a lot of games. So.
So how does Pirate Borg differ from Mork Borg?
It's cooler. It's got a fifth stat called Spirit, which is basically because we have a lot of spell stuff, and we have like two core classes that deal with spells, I think, and there's some other stuff like spellcasting and magic are a big part of the game, and so that stat is really useful. Also, just as a side note, I think that at this point there are more Borg hacks that use five stats than four. So I think that was kind of a recognized, I don't know that four actually covers everything that we need. So at this point, I think five's the norm. But the other big things that are different is we have a big naval combat system within the game that still arguably rules light, but like you talked about a mini game,
Yeah.
there's this whole other component of steering your ship, and one of your PCs is a captain, and they're calling out commands and doing things that way. But everybody, when you're in naval combat, everybody's choosing a role and they're doing something meaningful aboard the ship. You're not necessarily being a swashbuckler and a rapscallion and the class anymore. You are commanding a section of the ship, maybe the big guns, maybe the small guns, maybe the sails. Like you're in charge of this, and your choices and roles are going to affect how the ship behaves and what it can do in a given turn. So that's like a big change, big modification. I think the other meaningful note is that we have a very clear and expansive setting where Morkborg, like I think Johan and Pele talked about how the setting was the last thing they wrote, and they wrote it kind of like under duress. They really just wanted to make a cool, like punchy, weird Gonzo game. And then they're like, yeah, it kind of does need a setting. I guess we'll make one. And they wrote 12-page setting. Like, all right, that's it, done. Moving on, right? Um, in Pirate Borg, there is the Dark Caribbean, which is an alternative history version of the privateering age, and it imagines a world where there is a zombie apocalypse or an undead apocalypse that is, kind of spreading out from the Caribbean, and also there is Cthulian stuff all over, and cultists and elder gods and relics and yada 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 yada. So like pirates mixed with undead mixed with Cthulhu. That's pretty much where we're sitting.
Well, I think the movie Pirates of Caribbean just kind of started that whole like thing that people like didn't know that they wanted, right? I don't know that people up to that point knew they wanted that. And once people saw that, I'm sure that just created minds to explode and say, you know how other ways can we twist this up and make it gritty and cool and weird?
Yeah, another good example. I love that one. That's one of my favorite movies. But another great example is Michael Crichton's Pirate Latitudes.
Never seen
Um,
it.
It's a book.
Ah, that's why I haven't seen it.
There you go. Yeah. It was a book that came out like right after he died. And the statement that's in the forward or whatever is basically like, we found this completed manuscript on his computer. And so it's one of the few like um recent Crichton novels that isn't like co-written by anyone else. It's his. It's definitely not like his greatest work, but it's really cool. It's got a lot of great pirate action. It's got a Kraken in it. It's got cultist activity in it. It's a heist of a book. Like it's an ensemble pirate heist at its core with all sorts of like
So,
fantastical
so
elements
do
to
you
it.
think he wrote this imagining that he's going to sell the rights for a movie script and this is turning into a movie? Do you think he wrote this thinking, no, this is such and such the star of this? And
Yeah, I think there was some rumbling about like the time period in which he wrote it. I could be wrong. Like I'm gonna like put that preface up, but I believe I remember reading that he wrote it, and as he was like in the final stages of writing it, Pirates of the Caribbean came out, and he's like, "Well, screw that," and he just kind of like threw it in the shelf. It was like,
ah,
I, that's that feels like that could have been true for him and for everything. That said, I think he's wrong if he did that because this would have made a fantastic movie. And in the pirates craze of that era, where those movies were like taking the world by storm, a Crichton pirate story that's rated R and much more like as cool and intense as those Disney movies were. Like he would have dialed it up a few notches, and I think we could have had a really, really fun movie. Still could, but yeah, yeah, it's a really good read. I've read it a few times.
so I'm assuming characters die less often in Pirate Borg than they do in Mork Borg.
Well, that's I would say maybe. Depends on your GM probably.
So you're still walking around with like 2 hit points.
Yeah, you still basically progress it the same way. I would argue that maybe I was gonna say we're a little bit more deadly. I don't know that that's true. Like I think Borg gets a little bit of a bad rap there. Like first level characters are they're not even levels, but new characters are squishy in the same way that they're squishy in most other games.
Well, old school
Uh,
essentials, even so, you walk around with 1 or 2 hit points. It's not,
exactly,
it can happen.
BCC, whatever. The first time you get better in Borg or Pirate Borg or any of them, like the first time you get better in so many ways that you feel so cool and you are so much more survivable and you're so much better at everything.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that ever happened.
yeah, it's called. I think in the core Borg book, it's called Getting Better, and in Fireborg, it's called Gaining Experience. It's definitely like a milestone thing where, at the GM's discretion, you can maybe after an adventure, whatever, you get better. And getting better, we don't have to go into all of it, but basically, especially for a new character, it is almost certain, it is very likely that all of your core stats are going to get bumped up by 1, and you're going to get D6 hit points, and you're going to get a cool ability. That's huge, right? Like think about getting a +1 to every stat and getting, 4 plus 4 hit points on average. That I mean, you just get you're so
I
much more
find it interesting
survivable.
compared to like the fifth edition like mentality. Like it is, when you're living on a desert island, you find, this can of beans washing up. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, a
Yeah.
feast,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but fifth edition, you're like, yeah, I get so many more spells, and I get to do this and that. So, but you're right. I think that's the nice thing about more of the stripped down and harder is you really do appreciate the small things.
You do. And the reality is that most of the creatures in the game, most of the monsters that you'll fight or whatever, like they're terrifying. But a good chunk of them are designed to go after, I mean, they're not balanced, but they're kind of designed with the intent of you're going to be facing beginning characters. So the moment you have 2 or 3 get betters behind you, right? And you have 13 hit points and you have actual pluses to most of your stats, and you've got 6 character abilities. Like you're a badass. You're a real badass at that point. And you could take numerous hits. And keeping in mind, right, that in all the Borgs, players roll all the dice and there's pretty much a static difficulty level. They're not like the bell curve as much. Difficulty level of 12 for almost every roll. So the moment your stat goes up by 2, well, a bigger monster isn't necessarily increase the difficulty of your roll. So
Right.
your agility going up by 2 means that your defense score went up by 2, which means you're 10% harder to hit. You probably also got an ability that makes you harder to hit. Plus, then on the backside, you're dealing more damage and you're hitting more often. Like it's just, yeah, Borg characters become badasses after a handful of adventures. But you got to just survive those adventures. So
Yeah, I can imagine how this becomes like a, if there's a movie or a TV series, the we got to get better. I know, I know.
yeah,
Or I got better. You need to get better. I'm trying, Dan. I'm trying.
yeah, it's their montage scene or whatever. Yeah, and then in addition to that, right? So you have like a great getting better system that you can take advantage of. But then in the moment you have in Borg, it's called Omens. In Fireborg, it's called Devil's Luck. But it's every day you're getting typically 1 to 4 points that refresh, and you spend those points to maximize your own damage, reroll a d20 of yours or your opponent's, reduce the difficulty of something, things like that, which are again like basically so you're getting 1 to 4 get out of jail free cards every day. If you think about it, like you how many encounters you're having and how often that's going to come up, like that's a pretty big like tip the scales towards player survivability to be able to say, oh, instead of taking that damage that would have killed me, I'm just going to say I don't take that damage, or I reduce the damage by 6, or you have to re-roll the die and you lose, or whatever. Like that's a pretty big pivot. So that's why I say it's based on the GM, because if your GM is like throwing you like 6 encounters in a day, you're probably going to burn through all your omens and luck and
Yeah.
gonna die. But if it's up to them. I played in a lot of games where a lot of board games where nobody died, and I played in several board games where everybody died or just about everybody. And I like both, but I probably prefer the second one.
I've
I
only
like
really played, I think, one convention game,
yeah.
and but I mean, it felt like it was something that was intended that that it was reasonably survivable,
Yeah.
but at the end, probably not.
Right. Yeah. That's a great, especially one shots. Like
Yeah.
and that's a whole other discussion, but I think that one shots should be tipped against the players across the board. Like whether it's 5e, OSE, board, whatever you're playing, I think that a one shot should not I think if everybody survives and you just hit a home run, like that can be fun. It can be memorable. Most of the time, what it means is that you want to keep playing that character in that story, and that's just not possible in a convention game mode often, right? Or in a one shot. So it's much better, and you get much more lasting memories. I find if it's like we're gonna stack the odds against you, you're probably gonna die, but if you die, you're gonna remember it, and if you manage to survive this, you're definitely gonna remember it. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's where and people go to convention games for different reasons. Um, and sometimes it is why I ran last year the OSE game. I was kind of asking the people why they were playing, and some
mhm,
have never played it, and so they're just kind of curious how OSE worked. And so then as would do things, I would explain as I went along, like why I was doing what I was doing.
mhm,
And then also the characters could start with a bunch of hit points, but I said, well, the actual experience is you roll. They're
mhm.
like, okay, let's roll. And somebody had like 1 or 2 experience points, and
Yeah.
they look kind of aghast, like, well, you may be the one that survives this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You never know. You never know. It's definitely not what you think. Yeah, it's typically the difference between 1 hit point and 7 hit points is 1 hit.
Right, exactly. Right,
So
exactly.
yeah.
But I think, I tend to I either go to most of the time I go for conventions. I want to see how I usually like trying games I normally don't get to play,
Mhm.
and I like to see how they work.
Yeah.
And so I usually try and do things or activities that will be beyond always just the normal, just to see, what the system does or how it handles that. But other people are want to, you're right. Some people just want to go in for action and some want death or glory, and some, are just wanting to just yuck it up with their friends.
Yeah.
It's that's what's interesting when you have a convention with a group of people, and you think about, like, sometimes we have competing goals,
Yeah.
like as people,
Yeah.
not as characters.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not, and I would even say that that's true in person games, as like at your home game as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, uh, what the internet has done and online gaming and COVID kind of throwing us all in a big pile is it's become easier to fine tune that home game to be like only players who like this specific type of game. And that's great when you find that, because then, when I want to do my accounting game, yeah, I
Yeah.
can find five or six people that love that too. Now there's nobody there that's like, all right, can we fight something? It's just that's not a bad thing. It shakes things up
No.
sometimes, but it's really fun when you can, have your accounting session or have your diplomacy session or have your strategy session or whatever, and you do that for 3 hours, and at the end of the 3 hours everybody sits back and they're like, that was the best session ever, and everybody agrees, like, can we just do, like, there's a special feeling when everybody got exactly the same level of, like, hell yes out of the game.
Have you ever played like Smallville? Or
Smallville, I don't think so.
so we use the system for setting up events and people and locations and rolled dice, and we spent like 2 sessions creating this whole setup.
Yeah.
We played one session, it ended, and everybody was satisfied
Yeah.
because it was strange. We didn't go very far with this, but yet it felt like it was a good conclusion, even when we played a single session.
Yeah.
Because all the things that we set up that was non-game related, like role playing, was done.
Yeah.
And I thought that's kind of interesting. It kind of turned everything on its head. But there are
Well,
different ways of playing and what is fun and how we approach it.
because you were part of a committee, Jeff, that
Yes.
actually like accomplished its objectives and
Yes.
agreed upon a solution over a set period of time. Like that's got to be one of the greatest feelings in the world, to be like, you know, a design by committee actually worked and everybody had fun and it actually resulted in something
Well, it's
positive.
kind of like Inglorious Bastards, where the whole thing was set up, and then when we played, it was the basement.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Then the basement
exactly. Yeah,
plays out. You're like, all right, we did it. It's like
yeah.
half the people are dead. These things are happening. These people got their comeuppance, and now we know what happened.
One of my favorite things to do, I used to run a lot of Adventures League, and sometimes you would get modules that just weren't good or they weren't ready or however
Yeah.
you want to call it, right? And when I got a module like that, one of my favorite things to do was to say, let's like rip out most of the story and let's have a big fight at the end and let's have lead up to the fight. And so we're gonna have an hour and a half where I'm gonna like give a quick presentation on here's the setup, here's the objective. You're gonna defend this farmhouse from demons, right? Whatever. Um, and then, all right, you have now an hour and 15 minutes to tell me how you're going to like, prepare your defenses of this farmhouse. And then you're gonna fight waves of demons for 2.5 hours. Like that is sometimes like the funnest, like, yeah, just let them sit there and discuss and strategize and debate and all of these pieces. I
Well,
think
it's
Matt Cole,
non-linear too, right? What they're doing isn't like going through a tunnel.
no, yeah. You never know what defenses they're gonna come up with, right? What crazy ideas, traps, or oh, I want it, my the wizard's gonna go do this ritual, or the cleric's gonna go pray to the god for this thing. Like you never know what they're gonna devise. Um, and I think players really love that, to be like to put it in. And I think Matt Colville talked about, it has been years ago. He talked about one of his videos that, Wizards talks about there being three pillars of play. There
Yeah.
is combat, exploration, and Help me out here, Jeff.
Was
Combat.
it social? I can't
Social.
remember.
Yeah, probably social. Social, combat, and exploration. He said there's actually a fourth pillar, which makes sense, to hold up a building. There's a fourth pillar, which is debate, which is the meta pillar. And every great game is going to have all four of those components. And I think he's absolutely right. I think that that debate pillar of putting a puzzle, not a in-game puzzle necessarily, but a puzzle in
Right.
the hands of your players and saying, you guys figure out how you're going to solve this, and in an hour we're going to see if it works. Those are really really fun, and good. They're fun for the GM on that side too, because you have an hour of basically having to do nothing, and then you have 2.5 hours up. Your brain has to be constantly engaged and going nuts, which is really fun.
Yeah, because I think if done right, even if it all fails, if it all has a chance, even if it fails, it's still not a it's not a waste. You
No,
know, like they got to see, the fruition of what they did. Like they set this thing up, but it went off, but it didn't went off quite right. But at least it went off. I mean, there's a certain amount of satisfaction of even if it fails, at least you had a chance of making it work, and you get to see at least something happening from your labors rather than just, you know, I
well,
just
that's
swing a
the type of
sword.
story that we really obsess about, right? Like that's some of when you talk about like it's not true for every story, but one of the like our favorite movies are often the ones with that sort of a thing. If you think about like most people's favorite Lord of the Rings movie is The Two Towers because of Helm's Deep. Most people's favorite Star Wars movie is typically Empire, and a big part of that is, the Battle of Hoth, which is
Mhm.
basically Helm's Deep, right?
Yes.
There's like we're gonna have a little bit of prep. We're gonna, we're gonna re-outfit some speeders. We're gonna like gear up with tauntauns. We're gonna get the little dish guns in place. We're gonna ready the ion cannon. We're gonna do all these things, and then the Empire's gonna sweep in, and we're gonna see if our preparations paid off.
And
Um,
I think what's also good, because I've had players want to do ridiculous things. And I think if you set up the stakes where there's a chance of it happening, but also maybe even a greater chance of this thing's going completely bad, and they know it,
yeah,
and you let
yeah,
them roll the die.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And if it comes up, you say there's a 1 in 6 chance this will work, and there's a 5 in 6 chance this will go wrong, and you all die. They're like, okay, well, let's roll it. And it comes up to
yeah.
6. Everybody loses their mind.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Or if it rolls a
Exactly.
3, everybody's like, oh, but they realize,
Yeah.
they bought into the stakes.
That's a great note. Like stakes are super important, but stakes have no importance if they're not communicated, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that players like about the setup and then execution is that typically if there's a setup, you get a communicated stake level, right? Like if you don't hold the wall for 5 days until Gandalf gets here,
Yes.
you are going to die, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Like we know, we understand. It doesn't matter what he throws at us. The win condition isn't
Holding it for
it.
4 days. It's
It's
not for
yeah,
3 days.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. We understand. So anything we can figure out how to do, that's it. The win condition at Hoth is get everybody on ships and get them out of here, right? Like that's completely different mission, but that's the win condition, and it's communicated to us, the viewer, right at the start there as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, and that's man, just awesome. One of my favorite things. So. Whew. Got
So,
me excited.
not to shift gears,
Yeah, yeah.
but geeks can't.
Hmm.
So is the trio ever going to get back together again, even if in another form?
I would like to say yes. I'm gonna turn on this fan. I apologize, Jeff. If you yell at me if you can hear it and coming on your end. Um, I would say yes. The note right now is that Geeks Can't, as a property, belongs to World of Game Design.
Exactly.
And the reality of leaving a company is that you leave a company. So I understood that when I left, and where it's firmly in their hands. There has been some discussion. It sounds like at some point, um, that'll come back to us, but that that's up to other people, and it is what it is. And in the meantime, you know, I've I've had a lot of shakeup in my life, obviously, and Troy's had a lot of shakeup in his life.
Yeah.
John is more quiet about his shakeups, but he's had shakeups in the past, so probably like it's for the best that we're not trying to stream twice a week. But even as recently as 2 days ago, we had a call and talked about like, hey, what would this look like? Is there different avenues for this to be? What would it look like if we got everything back? Would we still do this exact same show, or would we do something different? Like, um, and the answer is probably it will probably come back and it will probably feel very familiar. But I can't help myself, and I'm probably going to twist a few knobs and see what happens. So
Yeah, well, I didn't know if I just needed to create another podcast, call you three up, and then just bow out while you guys do your thing. If that's
no.
the only thing that's in between you and that was just somebody to push the button, I could push the button, but
No, I think it's like, the reality is, I would love to do it. We would love to chat. I mean, like the reality of Geeks Can't, kind of like the reality of this podcast, I think in some parts, is that it's really just an excuse more than anything, right? It's an
yes,
excuse to get together with somebody or multiple somebodies and chat about something, and maybe somebody else will find it useful, or interesting. And but on the flip side, we've talked about, oh, maybe we just go do another podcast or another show. Don't worry about it. But once you pull that lever, it's really hard. Then if it comes back and Geeks Can't all of a sudden is in your possession 60 days later, you can't pivot again.
right.
So just being patient and saying, like there'll be some rebuilding. We'll probably lose some people. That's okay. People, people's habits have been broken at this point. Their listen habits, their watch habits, their Discord interaction habits. So we'll just continue to be patient, at least for a little while longer. Maybe after Gen Con, we'll get anxious.
Oh, that's right, because Gen Con is coming.
Gen Con is coming. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wild. Yeah. So in the meantime, like I think that the quick notes is that it's been fun to write on a bunch of different projects, and Troy's doing a bunch of different stuff, and I'm playing in a bunch more games than I was, when you're running around 6 different ways and you're streaming 2 nights a week. Um,
I, I've told people I've benefited from this situation.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because Zach was a busy dude. I would tell people I don't know how you'd be as busy as it can be when you're with Wogdy, but yet you still would find a way at 11 o'clock at night to hammer out some article. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It's been nice, and I know I'm already getting back to the stage. I'm not nearly as busy as what I was, but I know I'm already in the stage of like maybe it's having too many irons in the fire, but more I think it's like once you're back to having a busy job, a full-time job, you have limited time. But I've had a blast writing OSE for you. I wrote a Pirate Borg adventure just because I was like, hey, it's if I'm going to be part of this, I should
yeah,
throw something onto the pile of the community content. So I wrote something there. I wrote a big thing for Diogo that we haven't revealed yet, but that's going to be fun. Just I can't even like. I don't know how many little things I've gotten to write in the past 8 weeks that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So that's been really, really, really fun. So
yeah, I think that's for you. It's like it's probably not something you know. It's nice to switch gears and be able to do something like that for an amount of time, but you probably wouldn't want to be in that mode all the time, or maybe you would. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, like I like writing for other people and doing all that. So on that hand, yeah, I probably would be just happy doing it. But the reality is, and I've said this for a few years, like I really, really like, even if it means making less money, um, I really, really like having a consistent paycheck.
Yes.
And it's really, really hard when you're 100% a freelancer to have consistent anything. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of my note is like I'm super happy with Pirate Borg. I'm super happy with the guys there. I love all that. I love the work that I'm doing. That's the other thing is I like doing Kickstarters and backer kits and going to conventions and all that just as much, almost just as much as I like writing. So it doesn't seem like a bad trade.
No, but I mean, it's not all or one or the other. It's a
Right.
mix, and that's what's kind of, I think, can be healthy. Where, I'm thinking like, you know, if I were to be completely trying to make a living off of this, I'd have to be writing a whole lot more. But I don't know that I would enjoy spending, you know, 2/3 of my waking time writing. That,
Yeah.
or 2/3 of my week writing, and while the other portions, spent doing all these other things. But because right now I do a lot of stuff in my free my non work time. But then again, if I were to not be working a full-time job, I'd be replacing it. Then all of a sudden, instead of this being like a 10-hour week or 20-hour week thing, it would then become a 60-hour,
Yep.
or 80
Yep.
hour week. It's like, that may not be as fun.
Yeah. I would say it's maybe I'm different. Maybe it'd be different for you. I would say that piece of it doesn't get less fun. The not fun part comes in not with doing it more, but with the weight of this has to work or else, right?
But
You don't have
yes.
because like I mean like I love telling stories and designing monsters and whatever. Like I would do that all day, every day. Um, I don't think that I lose the excitement there. I think that that excitement gets muddled when it's like, if I don't write a monster every day, I don't have a house in 6 months,
Yes.
right? Like that's where it comes in. Yeah. If you don't have that, I think if you don't have that weight, it's harder, much, 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 much harder to get burnt out and feel like I don't want to create for this anymore. Or I don't want to do it at this level, or it's not fun. Um, yeah. And for me, another big part of it was like, I want to do it with some sort of a salary or guaranteed wage. I also don't want to be the boss because there's a weight that comes with that too, right? Um, that's also about paying bills, but it's also about paying people and hiring and firing people. And I did that for several years. I that's a weight, right? And it's
Yeah.
a weight that if you're willing to take it on, you can increase dollars and you can have more control. But you're going to have that weight, and if you let go of that weight and you let go of the need for control and you let go of the need for the maximum greenbacks, yeah, there's a simpler answer to be found.
Well, I mean, really, ultimately, I mean, we only have so much time on this earth,
Yeah.
and it's we probably want to spend it in ways that probably maximize our happiness and the happiness of those we care about.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
That's a good question, actually. I don't know that I have a great answer for it, but I'm gonna put you on the spot and see if you do. Like with RPG ramblings, what is the goal of a lasting impression? What sort of lasting impression do you want the publishing house RPG ramblings to leave on the industry?
I think so. What I would say is everything I produce are things that I believe in and I feel do not exist in whatever format it is. So I think in that sense, I just want to leave some Jeffness with as a whatever that means. I don't even know what that means, but I think I want that. That's what I want. I want to leave the world with at least a little bit of Jeffness. I don't even know what that is.
Hmm. Well, we could look this up real quick, but how many Kickstarters do you think you've done in the last few years?
I think it's 10.
Yeah. And you've probably done roughly about 150 books on average to backers during that time for
So
each
I've
one.
got yeah, I've got 1,600 backers, unique backers.
Yeah. 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 Okay. 1,600 unique backers and probably 15. That doesn't sound right. I was gonna say, you got 1,500 backers, but you probably printed and shipped 1,500 unique books at
Yeah,
this
not
point.
including
Like,
PDFs only
right,
too.
yeah. So there's 1,500 pieces of Jeff on various shelves across the globe. And that's kind of a cool note
Well,
that
I think for me, what even like musically and things that like really gets me emotionally moved is the idea that somebody does a thing and inspires a person to do a different thing. And that in turn inspires another person. Like, that to me is probably one of the most moving things like to
mm,
hear about,
hmm hmm
and it's like and it doesn't, and I think what we see is, and there may never ever be like um those influences like we have and what we create. I don't know where they come from, but I know they don't they're not spontaneously generated from me. I'm
right.
not a wellspring of this. I've taken on material. I've read magazines. I've read comic books. I've watched movies. I've played, you know, weird games with my friends, and I start seeing things come out of me that are really things that were from my youth,
Yeah, yeah.
and they mean something to me. Otherwise, that's how they're coming out. And maybe they'll speak to other people, and it will in ways they don't understand. And maybe they'll express their own selves from the
hmm
things that they see that maybe they wouldn't have before.
hmm
But it will never be a one for one. There never would say, there's nobody ever who's going to say, you know what, I thank God there was a Jeff Jones to produce this book. That will never happen. But it
I
does
don't
make,
know. I don't know about that. But I love that you say it like that, because I one of the things that you always put at the beginning of all your Gary's Appendix, let's see if you remember, but you have a line that you say at the beginning of every Gary's Appendix Kickstarter, right? When you have like banner image, then you have like, hey, this is issue blank and it's about then, and then you have your content splurge, and at the beginning of every content splurge, you have a one-liner.
I forget it.
You say inspired by the AD&D Dungeon Master Guide,
Yes.
right? And so the cool thing there, right, is that what you just communicated is that you want to be a book that inspires other people to do other things. And the first thing that you're communicating on every Kickstarter page for Gary's Appendix is, hey, I was inspired by this person and their product to do this, right? So you are taking the thing that drove you to create, and you're using that creation to then try to do the same to somebody else, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, really, there's something about, yeah, because we are in a community that creates, and we bounce things. I mean, yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but I think for other creators, there's this. It's a strange. I don't know why we are the way we are. I don't know why we
Right.
do what we do. This doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
but here we are, and
Right.
I don't know why, but that's what, to me, I think is the motivation.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Interesting. Hmm. Well, I'm really excited. I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but you and I have several things in the pot,
We
and
do. Well,
and
give me a
it's
second. I need to get some water. Just give me a
yeah, yeah,
sec.
you're good.
Yeah, I'm not the best at self promotion, but and I'm also not hesitant to talk about things that are in the future. So
Yeah.
yes, we do have some things in the pot. So I guess what things about in the pod do you want to talk about?
Well, I don't even know like that I had an agenda with bringing it up, other than I know you were that self promotion isn't your favorite thing, and I was like, well, you actually do have some really cool stuff coming down the pipe. Um, you know what? I have a weird topic um that is maybe more on parallel with what we were just discussing. If you're fine with a weird getting in the weeds a little
I'm
bit.
fine with wherever you want to take this.
I here's you get a coin, you get a coin to turn this back on me in a future episode. Have me
Okay.
come on and do this too. But you and I have talked about this a little bit in Messenger, right? And I don't think we're there. There's not a dissatisfaction or not a red warning signs going out. But why do you think it is that this really cool? I think one of the coolest issues Gary's Appendix 6, which is all about dragons, which is on Kickstarter right now. 13 days left to go as of this
Yes.
recorded. Why do you think that Gary's Appendix 6 is not funding at the same level as previous issues?
I have found that every issue is different. It seems like the most consistent thing is that that kick or Zine Quest is the best time to launch
Mhm.
a a uh, a Kickstarter for a zine, and so
Mhm.
consistently those have been great. The
Mhm.
rest have been less so. It's also interesting that I'm at 37% conversion, which scares me because I need more people because I have all the people that are going to convert. I only have about usually I get about 44% conversion on this, so I got to bring in new people.
Right.
But what surprises me is the Kickstarter ads are not really working. And I worked really hard on those Kickstarter ads. I think they're the best Kickstarter ads that I think I've ever done. And they have only driven a very small amount of people to the Kickstarter so far.
I learned a tip about this. Maybe you already know this, Jeff. But I learned a tip that directly applies to that. Um, so you run ads on Facebook. Do you mind if
Yes.
we get in the weeds? We're here for like
Oh,
2 minutes.
we go as
Okay.
many weeds as you want.
This is a new like angle on Facebook ads that I thought was pretty brilliant. Um, there is you can build an audience that is inclusive of only people that have trafficked to a specific URL, like your web store or whatever, right? So you could put in Gary's Appendix here, right? Theoretically, say, hey, you build an audience that is like Gary's Appendix 5, let's say. Then when you go and build your ads, you exclude, or let's say Gary's Appendix 6, you exclude anyone who has frequented
Right.
that page already.
Right. Because you don't want to have to pay for them with your ads. You'd rather be paying for other people to be clicking.
Because I'll tell you, like, yeah, exactly. Because I'll tell you, like, as a note, I see a Gary's Appendix ad probably 2 times a day. Um, and I like them, and I have to like stop myself from clicking on them because I know you're paying for every click that I do, right? And I'm like, oh, Jeff, let's see how Jeff's product is doing. No, don't click on it. That costs Jeff money.
Oh,
Just leave it
well,
alone.
I started wondering, like, did I screw up on some of these links? And did they go to a previous? I built them off a previous Kickstarter, and I
Yeah,
even clicked one just to make sure it wasn't
yeah,
going to go
yeah,
to Gary's Appendix 5.
yeah, yeah. No, like, so like, it's just weird to me because I think like, when you talk about a dragon issue and you talk about it being a little bit oversized and yada yada yada, I'm like, okay. And really, if you look at the projections, you're not like super far behind because you still got 2 weeks to go. And looking at like the previous issue, you were right around this mark with that one too. Honestly, I think you're probably going to end up at right around the same number
Me too.
ish.
I
But it would have been nice to see a little bump from having an oversized dragon themed issue. Like,
Yeah, but maybe dragons don't really make people that excited. I don't know.
I maybe, but I think that dragons are cool and most people like dragon. I don't know, like maybe,
I go
maybe.
I go through this whole thing. Is it they think, oh, have I overstayed my welcome? Is there too many Gary's appendices? If but then come February, it does real well. So I just think it's summer. The Metatopia podcast they were talking about. They said, COVID changed everything, and that Kickstarter's the traditional thing was you don't do a Kickstarter in November, and then when people were running a bunch of Kickstarters on a hot month, there's division. But then somebody ran one in November, does great because it's COVID time. But they said
Yeah,
we're returning to pre-COVID habits,
right.
and it's summer.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I got one group of people. This is what the situation. I get one group of people that will stay with me. I got one group of people that will buy them all.
yeah,
They first come in, and then there's no really in between. And so, and I think people just dip in and out because they know there's going to be another one.
yeah,
The only way to do it is I have to grow the audience.
yeah, yeah.
and
Uh,
Facebook ads aren't enough.
yeah, yeah. Facebook ads. Yeah, I think we gotta find some ways. We've talked about this some too, but the other secret sauce for Kickstarters, Facebook ads are a secret sauce, but another secret sauce is, a peer group promotions, right? Like whether that's, having guest writers come in, or it's, just having another OSE creator that is willing to hype your stuff to their community, like some way of saying, all right, Jeff has 500 people that are consistent. How do we get that to 800? How do we get 300 more consistent people?
Yeah, I think
That's a long-term hustle unless you have a you run a bunch of ads, or you team up with somebody.
I think that will help some. I think there is definitely benefit from that. But I think larger numbers would require either a much more forward-thinking marketing strategy, which I don't have,
Hmm.
or maybe looking to. So I think if I were to really, probably if I were full into OSE, that would be perfect. I'd be doing a bunch of adventures. I would be doing extra
Yeah.
classes. I would be doing a regular podcast on old school essentials. Then the Gary's Appendix would just be a portion of that, and probably could create an ecosystem. But I end up create what am I doing? I'm creating all these different products that are not necessarily related, and that other than there are people who do buy them all, and I really appreciate it. But the there's not a lot of overlap between people buying Scoundrels of Brixton and people buying Old School Essentials or
Have you
Gary's Appendix.
have you compared, like, have you downloaded your like backer list for Scoundrels, and like squared dropped it into a spreadsheet next to OSE and tried to square it up and see what the crossover is like?
No, but I also no, and this is a lot of it's also based off of I think I didn't I'm trying to think the let's be honest, I didn't Scoundrels. I don't know if there's been much OSE purchasing and I was kind of going more by backer kit
Mm-hmm.
purchases, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. But no, I
Yeah,
have not done the comparison.
that'd be really interesting to see, like, because I mean, like you say, you have a lot of variety, and arguably you do, but you also have like 6 issues of this, a few issues of Scoundrels, a few issues of the other one. I can't think of Wasteland, Madland. So at this point, like you've got a few, like it'd be interesting to see like what percentage is it. 60% the same, 40% the same, 20% the same. Like that would be really interesting. Like, is it a Jeff Jones audience that's carrying through?
Well, I do
Uh,
know that during the Madlands, nobody bought Gary's Appendix.
right, but is that because they already have it?
That's a good question. I got a lot of new people,
Okay, so you know
but
that at
well,
least.
let me rephrase it. I don't know that's the case. I know that I've had vocally new people, but
Aha.
that is based off of people have said things. That is not based on any sort of data. So I really don't know. The fact of the matter is, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how many new people? And I think I should be doing the snapshot of which I don't, but of the advanced analytics, advanced
Mm-hmm.
something, where it will tell you percentage of returning backers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like, um, and I think it may tell you from different Kickstarters what the percentages of return.
Mm-hmm.
But once the Kickstarter ends, that goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just asked because like it's fascinating to me. I think anybody that's as prolific as you, or as does as many as I have or whatnot, like you have things don't like it's just weird. Like there's no guarantees, right? I think that's the flat answer. Is the ones that you're like, oh, there's a one off. Oh, then it like explodes or does super super well, and then the ones that you're like, oh, this is a home run, isn't always a home run. Um, and then like the nice thing about what you've managed to create is that it's super consistent, at least, right? Like you don't have like a big dip ever. So that's definitely a win. But I'm just yeah, I really
I
I
would
really
guess I could be wrong. And would be looking at one way to look at would be the higher tiers.
hmm
I I would imagine that I probably was getting more higher tier people at. I'm wondering if I get more higher tiers at through during ZineQuest
hmm That's
because
possible.
the higher tiers are they are the highest amount percentage of dollars for the Kickstarter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because you're charging like at this point like $90 at those
Yes.
higher tiers, and you're getting 15 people. Well, that's a huge amount of your revenue off of just 15 folks. So
Yeah, especially compared to the $3 PDFs.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like how many of those? Yeah, you need so many more, so many more. Um, hmm. Well, it's interesting. I don't know what there's not probably an answer other than like other than then to recognize that if you're gonna do an oversized issue, maybe the learning thing for us both is if we're gonna do an oversized issue, don't do it in the summer. Um,
Well, I will say it's actually not oversight.
it's a
What
little
happened?
bit, right?
Well, here's what happened. This is the other thing that kind of got. Well, here's what messed me up. Is normally I can buffer the number of. So like I normally didn't care about article length as far as total amount of pages consumed because I could buffer it so I could buffer. Oh, that's rough. Not right. I could add or take away from the bestiary.
Right.
But the dragon issue, I was locked. Well, it's a self-imposed. By self-imposed is I locked myself into. I'm doing the OSC SRD bestiary,
Yeah.
and so I couldn't change the number.
Right.
And so, and then I got your dragon article, which had the metallic dragons in there,
Oh yeah.
and I'm like, I was like, and it was sufficiently long. There's nothing wrong with it. But I was like, what do I do? Like, do I cut another art? I mean, so I end up cutting out some of the dragons to put in a later issue.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, the length of that really, I didn't realize the problem until I was faced with. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. I got this other article by Zac. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, and you're up against the wall of you're kind of hedged in there with you've got a self-imposed count on one side, but you also have if you go too much bigger, you're gonna have to go to perfect bound.
So the reason I do this, you're right, because I can go more pages with Mixon, but I cannot go more pages with Lulu without going perfect bound.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now the question is, do people care? Maybe not, but for me, it's a self-imposed limit because otherwise I become stupid. I would. I've been there.
I think that there is a I don't think I'm alone in this. I think that there is a trench of desirability. I think that zines are desirable because they quote unquote lay flat
Yes.
and they have that aesthetic of indie. So there's some appeal both in the like lay flat. You can get graphics that go all the way to the edge, and
They're also
uh,
better quality. They will not fall apart like perfect bounds sometimes do.
right. So then you have perfect bound, small number, like I'd say like sub 120 pages, right? So like let's say 52 pages to 120 pages. I think that is the worst possible product for you to put out because it's just big enough that you lose all the cool stuff of the zine, but just small enough that you don't really get a win on the spine. Right, because if you can have that face out spine of Gary's appendix and it like visible on the shelf and all that, like that's desirable. But you really need like over 120 pages to have a real spine that
Ooh,
matters.
Jeff needs a spine.
Jeff needs a spine. Help, that's when you do the omnibus, that's the line, right? Help Jeff get a spine. Yeah, yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, I didn't tell you this. but my conversation with Chris Birch.
Yeah.
So they've got this book called Homeworld.
Yeah.
And
It's on
so
the shelf. Yeah.
and my question to him was, does the size format matter?
Yeah.
So what do you think his answer? Like I said, you did this thing. I asked him in an email, but I actually asked him in person because he didn't really answer it in the email. But what do you think his answer was?
Well, I can tell you what his answer was with the exact same question about John Carter,
Okay.
because John Carter is horizontal.
It's
It's a
as the
landscape,
dumbest
right?
as the dumbest
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Right. It's a whole different format. Nobody else
Yeah.
does it, right? So I asked him one time, I was like, why? I mean, I like all your stuff. I think John Carter design wise is just as good as most everything else. Like, it's awesome. So I'm not complaining. I'm curious, why do it? And he's like, because I wanted to and it looked cool. He had no like monetary or like reasoning. It was just like, I wanted to do it this way, this way. I thought it was interesting. We did it. So I don't know what his answer is for Homeworld, other than that I know that both Homeworld and or other, sorry, I shouldn't have snapped on your podcast. That's
That's okay.
probably good for the audio. But I can't think of what it's called, but they're right there. Where is it? Um Help me out here, Jeff. Dishonored. Dishonored.
I've not actually looked at
Yeah.
Dishonored.
Dishonored is in the same size. And Dishonored and Homeworld are what they call boutique lines for them. Boutique is this was a cheap license to get. It doesn't have near the size of fan base of the others. It allows us to create a book that has basically the same MSRP but is slightly cheaper, and that line will never grow at all unless the entire community comes out of the woodwork. Like Homeworld is like a book, a GM screen, a set of dice, and Dishonored is a book, a GM screen, a set of dice, and one digital adventure. There will never be anything else for those unless the community just goes nuts. So it's like highest margin they can get on a book, um, knowing that they're not going to have the purchase numbers of a Fallout.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what he told you or not, but
No, what he said is he said that that Homeworld has sold well. He goes, but the most important thing is for a book is to have basically presence on a shelf.
yeah,
And so it's less about the format, whether it's a 9 by 6 or an 8.5 by 11 or whatever,
right.
but it's the shelf presence, which would be the width.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
It-
So interesting.
he wants it to be noticeable on a shelf.
Yeah. Well, that's retail language right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, then I look at these scrawny little, and I do love them. They're fun. The old school essentials, uh, these little tiny little booklets, but I'm like, the only reason these things are affordable, like they are cheap as far as when you look at hardback books and you can buy a whole like set of these things, but he's buying by the jillions, so he's able to get, you know, enormous deals, but that makes no sense to do a 50-page tiny thin hardback that's A5.
Yeah. The only reason to do it is like for us is, dude, the margins are crazy good on doing a hardcover 48-page book because you can charge 30, $35 for it, right? If you put that book in a Staddle Stitch zine, you're going to charge what, $20 for it,
Right.
maybe? So you're getting almost double the amount. So you're making an extra anywhere from $15 to $25 more on that book than what you would have made. 15 to 20, we'll say. And your cost to print are probably like, if you just look at print on demand, your cost to print on demand goes up by like $5. So margin wise, you're making more dollars on print on demand by switching to hardcover. And as long as you're doing like over 1,000, which is a big hurdle for a lot of people, that for many people it's noticeable. But if you're doing over 1,000, like um it makes that you can get roughly the same margins on not print on demand, and
But I'm
so
thinking, I wonder if you're better off just doubling the page count and then being able to get a higher value out of it.
but see, here's the thing, like, yeah, now we're like, I love this chat. I love this problem, this dilemma. You have a $20 zine, right? If all you do is you turn it to a hardcover, you can probably get it to $30. 48-page zine, you can go from 20 to 30 just by making it a hardcover easily. However, if you take that 40-page zine and you turn it into a 96-page zine booklet,
Yeah.
hardcover, I don't think you can go to 60. I know you can't go to 60. Can you even go to 40?
Well, the question really comes down to, and I haven't did this in the spreadsheet, but the paper costs, your real costs in going up in size is not your product costs aren't going to go up that much, but your the main cost is going to be your writing and your art.
Right, exactly right. You're exactly right. But I'm saying, like, if the hardcover at 40 is at a 48-page hardcover is $30, what is a backer going to be willing to pay for an A5 hardcover that's 96 pages? Doubling the content. I
Yeah.
don't think they're going to be willing to pay more than 35.
But you may
Most.
not have to double it. You still may be able to, so just when you get the spreadsheets out, you
Yeah,
you may be able to do 50% more. It just depends on the volume, what you're selling. That's what it comes down to.
but it's just tricky, right? Because like I mean, why the answer to why have Wizard of the Coast books just seemingly gotten smaller and smaller on average, like their page count just shrinks because they realize that people would pay $50 or $35 on Amazon for a 220-page book, and they would pay the exact same amount for a 320-page book, and they weren't really complaining. So they were writing an extra 100 pages for no
Right.
added benefit. Um, and there is an upper cap. So like that's a big conversation that I think any creator should have is like, yeah, making an oversized book is great and it looks awesome, but you probably aren't you there's probably a point at which you're making the most amount of money per word that you possibly can, and then past a certain point you are making less and less and less per word.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah.
No, there's no doubt about that. But I guess, and I think there's also, I mean, the the content size, I mean, talk about the presence of the book on a shelf. That's definitely more probably of a retail, situation where people see it and like, oh man, it looks cool, than it is with a Kickstarter. But I don't know. It's kind of goes back with Journey of the Madlands. It did not have near the volume of some of my other stuff, but I was able to charge more.
Right.
So it's also less work on the back end with the fulfillment. It's a higher margin, but it just starts turning into weird math, and that's something that needs to be kind of worked out. And I think, and you're right, I shouldn't be necessarily discounting, but I guess the question is, if you're going to do a hardback, at what point there's going to be a point where it isn't worth it, and there's going to be a point where it is worth it. So I'm not sure where that line is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, like going like with some sort of, it's kind of, and that's the other thing. Oh, the other thing he said, this is interesting. He did not feel that there's any, Chris, that is, did not feel that there was, um, he didn't feel that there was necessarily that much advantage of having a paperback over a hardcover, or a hardcover or a paperback.
See, that's interesting because if we look, have you looked at your backer kit questions from the
Oh
last,
yeah.
right? What is that? What did they say? Like, we had a question that's like, if we were to expand to offering hardcover versions of some titles, would you be interested in them? But they would be at a higher price. And like, the highest rated answer is they would very much highly be willing to do that as long as the difference was only $10 or so. But right behind that was, hi, I back at hardcover tiers when given the choice. Like almost neck and neck were those two. And then like that's six, that's there's about 100 votes in here, a little under at the moment. And this is about 60 of those are in the high category. And then I only back hardcovers on rare occasions or lower, or I don't back, I always back at like the cheapest version. The lowest one with only 2 votes is I never back hardcovers if there's a cheaper / soft cover option.
Yeah, what's hard is the people that didn't answer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We don't know
So
what
we know
those
that the $3 private people that do the PDFs are not interested in
hardcover
hardcovers
versus, yeah, yeah, yeah.
or soft covers. They're just said, you know what, maybe eventually they will. But I think but you also state a counterpoint, which I think is true, that there's a feeling of better quality with the hardcover edition. You know, whether or not it is true or not, it definitely feels more a better quality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people who are collectors, they want it on their shelves. They want it's when I say quality, I mean as far as it's protected. The hardcover protects the book, and
Right.
it just makes sense. It's going to be you're not going to get the same kind of dings like you do with
Yes,
your
100%. 100%.
so yeah. So that's a thing. It's like going to not say an omnibus with Gary's appendix. Like do that. Is it paperback or hardback? I
Yeah.
don't know. Talk
Yeah.
about doing a bestiary, paperback or hardback. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's really wild to me that um if you look at, we also ask questions about like what, when back in a zine, what sort of content do you like the most and what sort of content that do you like the least, right? And I found those answers to be really interesting because when you talk about what content they like the most, far and above, this blew my mind, Jeff. Like honestly,
Yeah.
Adventures was the highest. I expected that. I did not expect it to be great, like almost half the votes in a Gary's Appendix survey, right? So Gary's Appendix backers say we love Adventures the most, and you don't do Adventures, right? The second one with almost as many, so accounting for 2/3 of the votes between them, was Settings. Settings have always not, this is not universally true because obviously there are big companies and there are special things where a setting can really sell. But by and large, if a creator puts out a setting book and then they put out an adventure book and then they put out a bestiary, the setting book will sell the least of those 3. However, in your audience, it's fascinating to me that settings are way up there. Like, because once you get past adventures and settings, like everything else is less than half of those, right? Um, as far as people value them the most, which is a very key note, right? Like what we're saying is if you were to rate these 6 options, which one would you give a number 1? They're almost everybody's saying adventures and settings. However, if you look at which sort of content do you like the least, bestiaries are getting, they get almost no votes over there. So the communication is, I think, certain people really like adventures and really like settings, but a large number of people, um, if they can't get a setting or an adventure, they want a bestiary, right? That's kind of their secondary
Yeah, and
option.
that's a question. So the setting, do they want a new setting or are they interested in that, or do they want something that is already existing? Because I've had somebody say, hey, Dark Sun, just do some Dark Sun material for it. I'm like, well, you know,
That'd be awesome.
yeah, I'm like, well, fortunately, I've never played Dark Sun. To be honest, I left role-playing games, or I wasn't playing that at the time that second edition was when second
Yeah,
edition came out. I wasn't playing second. I missed all of that. So in my heart is still stuck Greyhawk,
yeah,
even though I would still wouldn't mind playing other settings. But
right.
I mentioned the science fantasy thing we're working on. But
Yeah.
so the question is, I mean, I don't. Fortunately, I do have some adventures coming forth. Um, but
But yeah, and that this, by the way, we didn't do these, listeners, to to say how are we going to change things necessarily, but it's just because it's useful to know. Like, blows my mind that the thing, again, it's not a high percentage because on the least side we got a nice better spread, but about 20% of the about 20% of the people that responded said that the thing they like least in an OSE product is tables. That's insane.
So what's
That's
interesting
insane.
is when I pulled the data, I got mine. I think where I got mine was a different spreadsheet. I need to see how you pulled the data because when I
Yeah.
got it, it was a mess. And
Yeah.
so did you do some manipulation to make it? Because the way I got it was like I'd have to do more work to get it
No,
extracted out.
I'll show you how I did it, but no, it's pretty simple, straightforward. It's on BackerKit for people who are listening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like that's crazy. Like those were crazy
So they don't like
answers.
tables,
They don't like
um,
tables. Well,
because
again, 25% of people say tables are the least. Like you're playing a game that's all about tables.
you know well, the thing is they like a game, but it could be the least thing about favorite thing about the game is the tables. Like I was thinking about saving throws.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there used to be a chart with back of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons where you had to use a chart to figure out level, armor class, you roll, you cross reference. They did away
Right.
with that with ascending armor class,
Right.
but they kept but the saving throws, like it's really annoying the fact that you have to still figure out I'm third level or whatever and cross reference and look. Why isn't that cleaned up with just like with the with more modern games? And I think there's a lot of residual, I don't want to say baggage, but I think there's some baggage that gets carried on that it's part of the experience, but I don't think anybody had the um, willingness to extract that out without feeling the wrath of some.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's just very interesting to me. Like, we looking at another question, and we could spend probably 2 hours on this survey, but another one was like we sent out a question to just digital people, and um we said, hey, you just backed at a digital tier. Why do you back at non-physical tiers for this one, right?
Yeah.
And we gave them like a handful of options. We gave 4 options. The most selected option was, this isn't the type of thing I feel I need a physical copy of, right? The second most, tied for second, was I always collect purchased digital only, right? So that was a person that like
Yeah.
eschewed a library. And the right along with it was shipping costs were too high for anything else. Those two had half the answers of, this isn't the type of thing I feel I need a physical copy of. And at the absolute bottom was, I wanted to wait to select physical items of the pledge manager. I expected that. That got like less than 10, like uh, about 5% of the vote was towards that. But I think it was interesting to me that like the communication of, hey, the reason I backed this at a digital level was because shipping rates were too high. That was not a huge factor for most people, or at least not the biggest factor. Like that's interesting because I think what that communicates to me is shipping wasn't the issue here. If we refine the product presentation a little bit,
Yes.
refining the presentation, refining the product a little bit more, we can pull over a chunk of those, highest percentage of people that are just like, I didn't feel like I needed a physical copy of this. I wanted it. I just didn't feel like I needed a physical. We can't really do anything about the shipping, so we can't really ever win over the shipping costs were too high.
Well, the thing is, they may not know. And what I didn't do, here's what I did not do. And the problem is also with the survey, you don't know the difference between international
Exactly right. Yeah, we don't know that side of it yet.
and so earlier on, I think with Scoundrels of Brixton, the first one, I started advertising that the low for Facebook ads for the UK, I put on the graphic that the low UK shipping.
Yeah.
And I think that especially for people that are international, because it's fairly reasonable for us to ship to because we're drop shipping to the UK and to the EU. In fact, Australia just got cheap. In fact, a lot of them got cheaper. I don't know how that happened. Japan got cheaper
Hmm.
because that one time I sent stuff to Japan. It was weird. Same thing to Japan. Two different provinces. One was $20, one was $28.
Mm-hmm.
And but anyway, um, but I think you're right. That's a good idea that it may not get us more people, but it may get people backing the more people backing the physical product.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that I think the last thing that I would just note real quick is like I asked a question, what other RPG systems do you typically back slash
Yes.
buy? That dude, that is like a shotgun. Like there is so like there's there's definitely some through lines like DCC crops up a bunch at 5e, still jumps up a bunch. But like there's no like consistency. It's not like I only buy OSR stuff. It's like the OSE. This is specifically. I'm looking specifically at Madlands, I guess, at the moment here. So it could it could be phased, but it's not. Madlands got a whole variety
Yeah,
of
and I think it's
people.
probably the nature of that. Because you
Yeah.
think what a weird product this is. Like
Yes.
who in the
Yes.
right mind is buying this product? Like it's not tied to any particular system, even though it is kind of tied to old school system, but there's no post-apocalyptic like official
Right.
rules out. Like
Right.
the people that are going to buy this are going to be people that are eclectic collectors
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah, that's
But
fair. So
but
I'd
but
be
I
interested
but
to throw that same question into Gary's appendix and see what happens.
yes, and I think what's also and what I did is I took the each individual answer. So if a person answered like five different things, I
Yeah.
split them all out. I haven't done the spreadsheet. I was going to do is clean it all up, make sure OSR was always OSR and 5E is always 5E. I was going to do a count on those. I haven't done that yet, but I was kind of curious as to seeing what the count is for those.
Yeah, do a count, do a percentage, and then like I think that
Yeah.
could generate a lot of discussion because like if you said like, hey, we did an OSE apocalyptic Kickstarter and of the backer kit surveys completed, 25% of them say that they buy 5e, 18% say that they buy DCC. Like that would be a really interesting.
Yeah, what's hard is some people, and the ones I only counted were the ones that people gave a specific answer. They said, "Oh, multiple systems."
Exactly. If they
I
say
dropped that,
varies, yeah, it
but it
doesn't
seemed like
matter.
DCC was a high percentage.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I
And
agree with that.
also, we kind of talked before. It's like even with the Mutant Year Zero, or the Year Zero engine was fairly common as well. I was surprised.
Yeah, Mothership's high up
Oh yeah,
there.
Mothership was the other one. So it's like,
Yeah, but that makes a lot of sense because those are like DCC and Mothership are very big Kickstarter communities, right? Like they grew up there, so to speak, right?
yeah, you're
So
right. You're right, and right. So you don't have people who go to Kickstarter, right?
so you're
So
not gonna. I would be blown away if somebody's like, oh, I buy a lot of. I typically back slash buy a lot of 2D20 stuff. I would be blown away if that was the answer on Kickstarter because I'm like the 2D20 community is not on Kickstarter. Um, maybe it will be in the future, but right now, like the 2D20 folks don't care because Modifius doesn't. I mean, they've done one 2D20 Kickstarter in the past like 4 years, so that's you're not building an audience on that platform at that point. So
I didn't realize that.
yeah, they did the Cohors Cthulhu, which they had the minis and all sorts of stuff in it too, I think. But that was the last one because they did that one there. They did the Homeworld board game. They then before that they did the Panda Kung Fu Panda board game and Siege of the Citadel board game. And like all their board games were on Kickstarter, but it's been a while since they've done a book Kickstarter.
So what I've heard from other people talking, I was on a podcast.
Yeah.
They say that because I was not a fan of the Conan 2D20, and somebody said the Cohorts Cthulhu is really Conan version 2. Like if you're one to play Conan, get that one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I like the rules for the Cohors. I played it once. But I mean, I love 2D20, so I haven't played Conan, so I guess I can't compare them as a one-to-one, but
Well, it was the first.
Yeah,
So, and it was, I think, overwritten on a lot of things and not clear
gotcha,
on others.
gotcha.
So every time they did do it, like, you know, I've had people like slamming 2D20. And I think there's some things in the book that are just very, very unclear. And I don't know why they're unclear. But in general, I can buy a 2D20 Octane Cthulhu module, flip through it a little bit, and I can run it
Yep, yep,
easily.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yep,
like I've never seen short of like a OSE product like Necrotic Gnome, adventure
yeah,
that was just like you just pick it up and you run it. Like you can read it and run it. It's like
yeah, yeah.
it's
It's
genius.
incredible.
So
It's incredible. Yeah.
yeah.
They're like 4-page adventures are some of my favorite products out there. So
Yeah, so in the people I ran through, it was funny as they were, I'd say as kids, a good percentage of kids, so they had a great time with that.
cool. That's awesome.
Well, I think we may be hitting the time-space continuum, Zach.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, like it's been great, and like we could just sit here. I think like there's still a few more survey questions, and we could go over all those and talk about 2D20, and I could tell you some stories there. Like there's a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we'll just have to come back and do another episode sometime. So,
Yeah, well, it takes a while for it to do its magic, and then when I go to upload, it takes a long time for things to load, and it's
and we're at 2 hours, so
we are at 2 hours.
yeah,
Yeah, I did indulge a couple of times way past that, but in general, I think 2 hours is probably at least a good mark to stop at. So we can save some material for the next time.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so is there anything you're wanting to
You know what? I'll do this. How about if you don't mind me telling, I mentioned it earlier. Let's say Gary's Appendix 6, still on Kickstarter for 2 weeks. Articles by me and Troy and Graham and some other amazing people. But also, I think the other thing I would note just really fast is if you go, if you reach out to me, that's probably the easiest way. No, you can go to Itch or you can go to Drive-Thru and look up me. Look up Zac Goins. You'll find the new Pyroborg adventure that I wrote. It's called The Repentant. It's like a one-shot style encounter, 12 pages. And I had a lot of fun writing it. I think it's pay what you want on Drive-Thru. I think it's pay what you want on Itch, so you can go get it for free and let me know what you think. That would be kind of the thing I would give a thumbs up to.
but I would say that, having a very limited experience playing Morkborg, I would assume that with just a minimal amount of effort, you could turn this into a 5e adventure, less effort to an old school essentials
Oh yeah, I mean
adventure.
like the complexity of changing a Borg to a thing is adding complexity. You've
Yes.
got the basics there. You just add complexity to get to those other things. So yeah, not an issue.
Yeah, so even if you're wanting a taste of adventure, or you just want to just say, you know what, I just want to add some pirateness into my games, what a great supplement to pick up. And it's pay what you want.
It's your point. Free, really. Don't pay anything for it. If you're listening to Jeff's podcast, that's all the payment I need. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and for those on Facebook, please, or not Facebook, but YouTube, please, hit the subscribe button
Perfect.
and like,
Yes, yes. Subscribe, hit the bell icon to turn on
yeah, I need a
notifications.
bell icon. I don't know how to put the bell icon on, so I mean, it's
Okay, I just know that that's the thing that gets
maybe
said.
I'll look
So
it up and before I post this video, I'll point
yeah,
and see.
yeah. I
Okay,
think
that's it.
probably
Yeah.
like down
Oh
here
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That'd be great.
I'll put that in post. Okay, thanks again, Zach.
Thanks, Jeff.